okay?
Yeah, cool.
Cool.
Yeah.
So, welcome.
Welcome.
For those that might not know you, Dean, what's been your life journey so far, and how would you best describe what you're doing now?
Good question. Life journey. Okay, where do we start with life journeys? I started my life in the steel industry. I was an engineer, and kind of started as an apprentice technician, worked myself up, if you like, and then I moved across into commercial, got a taste for sales and business development, and stayed in that industry in that role for a while, and then moved across when things changed, and kind of developed. So I moved from being a sales rep, if you like, to an sales manager, and then through to a regional sales manager, and then I kind of worked my way up the ladder. UK sales manager for a while, and then I was made redundant, and I moved into a bit of property development and a bit of property business. So I kind of, for my first taste of running my own business for a while.
Uh-huh.
And then, a few things happened in life, and I had to go back into employment. And it was at that point I got introduced to network marketing for the first time. And we took that up, and that's been the mainstay almost of what we've done over the last 7 years now.
Mm-hmm.
And so, what do I do now? I suppose I split my time. Network marketing is my focus. That's my business. I do some training around that for the company that I'm associated with, and then also I do a bit of mentoring and coaching, if you like, helping people from that industry or other entrepreneurs.
Mm-hmm.
So what I call solopreneurs, people who are usually either involved in a business themselves directly or some sort of self-employed, or they're in a small business and they don't get to spend as much time on themselves as they do the business.
Mm-hmm.
And I help them look at, all the things around personal development that I've been exposed to, mainly through my time with network marketing, but also prior to that as well. So that's kind of how I split my time, and then I do some consultancy as well.
Okay, fantastic. That sounds good.
Hi, Dean. It's Danny here. I was lucky enough to have attended one of your events at the beginning of the year, and I attended quite a few events, but I've told anyone who will listen that yours was definitely the best event that I attended in January. One of the most thought-provoking, inspiring days. That really, really excellent. So it was a surprise to me to discover that a recurring theme in your life, especially in the early part of it, was this feeling that of not being good enough. When did that begin? When did you realise it was something that was holding you back? And how easy did you find it to overcome?
Yeah, it's funny, and thanks for saying that our event was really good. We really appreciate the feedback. It's one of those things. It's kind of if you like, it creeps up on you. Or I found it did. If I look back in my life, it probably started when I was really young. I mean, most of us develop belief systems and things when we're 5, 6 year old. Yeah. But that's not when my earliest memories were. It's sometimes difficult to remember those times specifically. But my earliest real memories of it were probably between the ages of kind of what most people talk about as their formative years in terms of school, probably about ages of 10 to 14. And there was specific times when I started to question myself and think, hang on a minute, why is that happening? Or you tend, when you develop a belief, what tends to happen is in later life, we just spend our time validating. We just spend our time trying to confirm that it's true. And so I've got kind of maybe one or two key memories. I played a lot of football when I was younger, and outside of the school kind of team, if you like, my father coached a side, and I went and played in that side.
Yeah.
And I've got nothing but utmost respect and love for my father and family, because they did a fantastic job. I have no way to say I had a bad childhood or anything like that. But my parents went to the same parenting university as everybody else's. They just kind of make it up as they go along as best they can, and they think they can do, whatever they think is best for us. And so, and I know this now because I experienced it, but he was probably harder on me as a coach than he was on anybody else, because he felt he had to justify, my position, if you like.
Yeah.
And But what that did lead me to is the times when, I can remember being sat in the dressing room and he'd read a team sheet out and I'd be on the bench that day or something. And I just used to look sometimes and think, well, how is that possible? What, maybe I'm not good enough to be part of the side. And it wasn't, it never made any major, had any major impacts at that point, but it just kind of, it kind of digs away at you over a period of time.
Yeah, you're so susceptible at that age, aren't you?
You are. And a few years later, I have another real key memory where I'd done really well at school. One of the things that I talk about sometimes is I kind of became, because of this idea that maybe I'm not as good as everybody else, I kind of tried to become an overachiever. I tried to be absolutely the best I could possibly be at anything, almost to my detriment sometimes, because I'd say things like, well, if I don't think I'm going to be the best at it, I'm not going to do it. I'm not even going to attempt unless I can be, the best there is. And I remember doing really well in an exam, and I scored a really high mark, and I'd come home and I was really proud of it. And I said, this is what I got. And I know why they were doing it, because they're looking for you to improve all the time. So the question was, okay, so what bits did you not get right? How can we help you focus on that? Yeah. But again, it was like, hang on a minute, I've just done, I've just got 90% or whatever, and we're now focusing on the 10% I didn't get. So I
totally get that as a parent myself, because I think it's a natural thing to do. When my little boy will come home and he'll say, I got 38 out of 40 in a test. And I'll go, which one? You feel naturally to say, which ones did you get wrong? And you're not focusing on the 38 that you got right,
Yeah, and it is a natural thing. That's why I say it's not, it's no slight on parents anywhere in the world, including mine, but it is a natural thing that's what we focus on, when really we should be focusing on all the things we've done right, and how can we encourage you to use that to improve in the future. And so that was kind of the start of it. That's when I first started maybe to start a question. And then as things happened, like I said earlier, things happen in your life, and then you use that to validate that belief being true. So every time something would happen that didn't go the way I thought it was going to go, or I didn't have the level of a success I was expecting in some way or shape or another, I would then use that to validate the belief, well, that's because I'm not good enough. Yeah. So, you get made redundant. Things are outside your control, but internally we start to say, well, maybe the reason is because I wasn't good enough to do that. Maybe I was in the wrong job, or I don't have the skill set. So it's kind of, like I said, it creeps up on you over a period of time. And then eventually it gets to a stage, or certainly did with me, where I got to the point where I felt it was holding me back. I wasn't making decisions that I thought I should make, simply because I was thinking, well, what if that doesn't work out? And I know it might not work out because things haven't worked out in the past, and I know it's probably because I'm not that good at doing that, so I'm not going to do that. I'm going to stay away from it. So it stopped me challenging myself to do things, because I just avoided them altogether. And in terms of, was it easy to overcome that? My whole concept, and lots of the theories I talk about, is that it's about having an awareness in the first place. And most people don't do anything about anything because they don't have an awareness of it. So things are a mystery to people till you develop an awareness. And once you've got some awareness of it, it's no longer a mystery.
Yeah.
And so, getting the right level of awareness, once you had the right level of awareness, it was fairly easy to make changes. The difficult bit was developing the awareness in the first place. So kind of recognizing it, making the decision about it, and then saying, right, I need to do something about this. I've got to find a way through it, and starting to look at, okay, why did it happen in the first place? Where's it come from? And what can I do about it? They're all the hard bits, if you like. The easy bit is once you've got an awareness to go, okay, so I understand that's now a load of rubbish, for example. It's much easier to do it when you've developed a level of awareness to say that.
Yeah, well, that's a great answer. I think a lot of people who'll be listening will resonate with that. So thanks for that.
So, Dean, I've heard you speak around the idea of the imposter syndrome. So for those people listening that might not know what that is, could you kind of explain it for us, how it can affect people and how it might have particularly affected you?
Yeah, it's kind of it usually comes in a few different forms. Certainly the ones I've seen and experienced is this idea that, first of all, that maybe you've got this belief that I might not be good enough at this. whatever it is that you're doing. And this idea that somewhere along the line, someone's going to find it out. So, I feel like a bit of a fraud, if you like. And there was times when I did have levels of success. So, I was a UK national sales manager managing a team of people up and down the country in what was perceived to be a relatively successful position with all the trappings that went with it. But inside I was thinking, you shouldn't be here. So, somewhere along the line, somebody's going to say, yeah, I knew you were never good at this. How did you end up in this position? And it doesn't happen, but you carry this internal belief with you that somewhere along the line it will. Yeah. And that's certainly what was happening for me. But the other alternative sometimes is that you get people, and I've spoken to people or interviewed them where they've had good levels of success in one aspect of their life. So it might be a business, it might be a job, it could be sport if they're that minded, or some level of it. But they feel like they can't transition that into any other part of their business because they feel like a fraud. So they're like, well, I'm successful in this, but for some reason I can't do it anywhere else in my life, and therefore it must not be transferable. I must not be good, really. Yeah. I've just had a bit of luck to get me in this position. And so what happens is over time it breeds self-doubt. So we continually focus on it. It's there in the back of our minds and our subconscious all of the time. And like I said, every time something happens, we use it to validate it. Right. We use it to say, yeah, that's happened because of the fact that, someone is going to find out. And then when things happen, certainly for me, effects it had on me. When I was made redundant, that was the first thing I did, was to say, so someone's found out. Right. You've been found out, somewhere along the line, someone's looked back and said, well, yeah, actually, you should never have been in that position in the first place. And it does, it kind of, it acts as this like reminder, if you like, and validation of your belief system. Mm-hmm. It just confirms all the time. And then it builds this ongoing fear. And I liken it sometimes to when when you're affected by it, it's like, if you're going to the airport and you're carrying your luggage, you guarantee when you check in that if you've got massively heavy luggage, you guarantee that the gate's 10 miles away. Yeah. If you've got the lightest bag in the world, it's just down the walkway. But I liken it to that because what happens is the longer you carry it, the heavier and heavier it gets, until eventually you struggle to actually carry it anymore. You struggle to walk, move with it. That's what happens with these belief systems, with our behaviour patterns. That's what happens. We get to a point where you almost come to I can't carry this anymore. I literally can't. I'm not making any decisions. I'm not taking any action. Yeah. I'm not moving forward simply because I know there's something holding me back.
Yeah, I think now you've described it like that, definitely a lot of people will be able to identify with it. It's probably a lot more common than we actually think, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it is, and especially from certainly the people I've spoken to, from an entrepreneur position, I think it most definitely is, because lots of us come from, an employed background, or we've grown up in the same sort of era, and then we're either parachuted in or we're forced into this position of being an entrepreneur. Yeah. And we assume we have to change. We assume we have to be completely different now. And it was one of the things that, I as you know, I've read the book that you guys wrote, 5 Levels, and I use it a lot with the people that I work with. And that's where there is a real connection in that, the message that you give is that you don't need to change the language. You don't need to be someone else when you move into this world. I'm exactly the same. I say exactly the same thing, but most people think they do. Yeah. I've got somebody different now. And part of that's based on, who we think we are to start with.
Definitely. Yeah, totally agree with that.
Awesome. Look, great answer. Now, 2 books that I absolutely love, Rich Dad, Poor Dad and Think and Grow Rich, are 2 books that have clearly influenced your life as an entrepreneur, Dean. What are some of the biggest lessons that you've taken away from those particular books?
Yeah, I mean, they are. I'm a big reader. Personal development for the last maybe 10 years or so has been a big part of my life. I do read a lot, but there are certain books that kind of stand out for you for various reasons. Rich Dad, Poor Dad for me, it stood out for a few things. One was that it was the first book I read that really opened my eyes. I was at a time in my life, I think, when I kept thinking, is this the only way? There's got to be a better way than just working for the next however many years it is in this position. There's got to be something else. Surely this isn't the only way. And it was the first book that kind of opened my eyes to another way. That there was other options. And it changed my perception, if you like, of the business world or employed world and careers and things. So that was my first big takeaway from it. The second one was this idea that he talks a lot, Kiyosaki talks a lot about this idea of working for somebody else, being an employee isn't not necessarily going to get you where you want to be, depending on what you want. If you want real success or you want to progress significantly, then you need to be in one of the other categories that he defines them. So that was another eye opener for me. This idea that okay, maybe I need to be thinking about other options. And the other thing, the real big thing for me was it was my first real kind of introduction to passive or residual income. This idea of for Kiyosaki, it's about property and things like that, or investments, but it was just this whole new world of, hang on a minute, where's all this been for all of my life? How did I never come across this before? So that for that reason, it just opened my eyes. It started me looking at other avenues, other options, but it also started me looking at personal development, because I'd read a lot. I always enjoyed reading, but it was my first real book, if you like, that it's not what I would call a true personal development book, but it is from that genre, and it was like a breath of fresh air in terms of, okay, this is different to anything else I've ever read, and it started to open my eyes. Think and Grow Rich, it's a strange book. Think and Grow Rich. It's become what I call my Bible, because I genuinely do read it every single day. But I've probably read it 3 or 4 times before I got anything from it. And lots of people say to me, I didn't see that the first time I read that book. And one of the things I've come to realize is it's not that it's not that it wasn't in the book. It was always there. I think what happens is we see things in ourselves the second or third time, so we're in a different space when we read it. That's certainly what happened to me. I read it 3 or 4 times, got nothing from it, and then I read it at a time in my life when I really needed something, a bit of inspiration, and it was one of those moments I genuinely couldn't put it down. I was like, how did I not see this in this book before? And there were lots of lessons in there, I think, that I've taken from there. And the other big thing that I got from it was, later on when I was involved in network marketing, I got an opportunity to be part of a group who studied it. And that just took my understanding to a whole new level. That was like, okay, there's stuff in here that, everybody should know this. This isn't just about, general business successful people. This is just this, everybody should understand this type of information. And I think the key things that I took away were, there's 2 big things for me after I really, really delved into it. One was that most people who've read it or have looked at it know that it's based on Napoleon Hill's study or interviews of 500 of the most successful people of his generation. What people don't know or miss sometimes is it as part of that journey over 20 years of those interviews, he interviewed 17,500 other people.
Wow.
Who weren't massively successful, because he wanted to make sure that what he was defining as the traits for success were just for those people who were successful, and those who were unsuccessful weren't doing the same sorts of things.
So it was quite thorough, to be fair, wasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And there's lots of bits in it that really stand out. Obviously, in terms of its overall delivery, it's kind of all the key steps and principles for success. And it's been the most successful personal development education book since it was written. And although it was written in the kind of 30s, it's as valid today as it was then in terms of the information.
Yeah.
I think
Well, it's been updated a couple of times, hasn't it? And there's one out now at the moment. There's the Legacy out now, isn't it?
That's right, yeah, and they've just made a movie about it as well. So yeah, it's kind of been continually updated. I think that the core principles of it will always be the same, and I think that there was a couple of things in it that really opened my eyes. One was it was the first real book that I'd read that in a structured way opened my eyes to the fact that how powerful our mind is, and we spend next to no time whatsoever developing it, understanding how it works, and learning how to use it. In relative terms, we scratch the surface at best. I was having a conversation with someone the other day, and we were talking about how technology has moved on, and on a mobile technology now, our mobile phones got more computing power than we had when we sent a man to the moon.
Wow.
And people talk about the latest computer, or a small USB memory stick now can hold hundreds of thousands of photographs, tens of thousands of songs. Full-length feature films can fit on this small piece of electronic gadgetry, and people spend time learning how to use that technology. Yet the mind, it controls. I think I read somewhere it performs 6 trillion actions for 60 trillion cells in your body every second of every day, and yet we don't spend any time trying to understand how it works and how we can use it. But we'll spend hours learning how to use the latest app on our mobile phone. And so it was the first book that kind of opened my eyes to that aspect and how to use it potentially. And the two other things that really stood out for me was some of the key principles that he talks about. One of them is imagination, and it's become a big thing for me in that I think that as a society, we again, thinking back to childhood and the way that we use things, as a society, we're always, or a large proportion of the time, we're stopping people being creative. We picked up lines all the time saying "stop daydreaming." I can remember being at school and hearing people saying "stop daydreaming." Be realistic about things. But everything we've ever achieved in the world has been by people using their imagination. And yet we try and stifle it. With education, which is another big thing of mine. We're too focused, I think, on teaching everybody the same way to try and get a single result based on regurgitating information that you've learned, as opposed to thinking creatively about how we can make a difference and how we can change things. I read a really interesting statement recently that said that if you ask a group of 5-year-olds a question, 95% of them will give you a creative answer. If you ask a group of 40-year-olds the same question, only 5% of them will give you a creative answer. And for me, what that's done is demonstrate that over that period of time, we've just kind of dumbed down that creativity. We've just said the only way to do things is the way we've always done them. Whereas, as we know, as parents, you can give a 5-year-old or a 6-year-old a box and a carton, and you'll see them, make a space station out of it and all sorts of things. And yet we don't really build on that. No. And Think and Grow Rich also gave me an introduction to some of the other kind of people that I've studied and used as mentors. So people like Earl Nightingale, Bob Proctor, some of the lesser known people, maybe Maxwell Maltz and Wallace Wattles, and that's kind of broadened my knowledge about it. And it also led me, one of the concepts that Hill's really big on is masterminds. This idea of finding people who got a same external or long-term goal as you, maybe not in the same business, or maybe not with the same ideal, but certainly of the same like mind, all looking to move forward, and how you can tap into that. And that led me to finding, a mentor, or however you want to call them, someone who'd studied with people like Proctor directly, to try and help me in terms of where I was going. and they, that's something I think that is massively beneficial in any business, particularly in our industry. When we do work with people on a day-to-day basis as well as on a long-term basis, to be able to have that group of people who are all working in the same direction.
I've got to say that for me, it's one of my favourite books as well. It's one of the first books I got. My upline bought it for me at the first network marketing seminar that I went on. And I discovered The Secret at the same time. And they were both telling me the same thing, the chapter on auto-suggestion. And I'm like thinking, where's this all been? And they were both saying the same thing, this, if it's in your mind, and I love the chapter on auto-suggestion.
Yeah, it is, and it's interesting that, because it's probably one of the shortest chapters in the book, and it's the one I think people quickly read through and go, "Oh, I understand that," without really studying it and understanding the power that's in it.
Yeah, totally.
So, Dean, I've seen you speak about limiting beliefs, and I've heard you say that when you destroy those limiting beliefs, that's when change can happen. So, for the people listening, are there any simple techniques that people can start to use to start to take these limited beliefs away?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. I think what happens is, to give people understanding first, because I often talk about limiting beliefs, and I think that the difficulty for people is to try and associate with that in terms of what does that actually mean for me. I'm not sure what. I'm not sure what, if I've got a limiting belief, and if I have, I'm not sure what it is. So I talk often about patterns of behaviour we develop over a period of our life. We develop patterns of behaviour, and once you recognise a pattern, you can then try and understand what they are usually underpinned by a series or a set of beliefs, a system of beliefs. So when we're born, and I use this as an example a lot, we're only ever born with 3 fears. The fear of falling, the fear of loud noises, and the fear of abandonment are the fears that we're born with. And I started to ask myself questions about, okay, so if we're only born with 3 fears, where did I get all the others from? And so looking at, understanding where did I get them from, understanding, recognizing you've got them, and then looking at how did I get them and where did they come from, it gives you a clue to start looking at, how can I get rid of them? Because if they're not serving me, then I don't need them. They're holding me back, in essence.
Yeah. And
it's easier when people recognize a pattern. So I give you an example. Somebody might come and say, well, I've got a real fear of public speaking. Well, that's a pattern of behaviour. They don't have a belief about the fear of public speaking. They might have several beliefs that underpin that pattern that's causing them a problem. So it's identifying the pattern is the first thing. And then once you've identified the pattern, it's looking at, okay, so what would a person who is struggling with that particular behaviour, what would they need to believe about themselves in order for that pattern to be exhibited?
I see.
And then once you understand that, and again, it goes back to that point that we made earlier on about having the awareness. Once you've got an awareness of, okay, so a person who is afraid of public speaking, they may have a belief about themselves that, well, people might not be interested in what I've got to say. So that might be a belief that's underpinned that behaviour pattern. And once you can identify some of the key ones, then you can start to think about, well, where did they come from?
Right.
And how did they... how did they happen to? How do I happen to believe them? Because the thing about beliefs is that it's really difficult to tell somebody this. But when you believe something, it's very difficult to say to somebody that that's not true.
Right.
Because they actually believe it to be true. So if you say that somebody believes something about themselves, and you say, well, but that's not true about you. So if somebody said to me, I have a real fear of public speaking, and I believe it's because, I don't think people are interested in what I've got to say. I don't think I'm the sort of person who can speak publicly. If I tell them that, well, actually you've got a great personality, you've got charisma, it doesn't make any difference what I say to them, because they believe that they can't.
Yeah.
But what I use as an example sometimes is I say that we all had beliefs before that have changed. It's because at one point we all believed in Santa Claus, and something happened to change that belief. So the real key, I think, the simplest way for me to explain it is to say to people that if we could get people to understand on a deep enough level that the self-image, the image they have of themselves, is something that we've made up. It's not real. It doesn't exist in itself. We made it up based on things that have happened to us, things that people have said to us. If they understood on a deep enough level that it was made up, they could then just say, well, that's a load of rubbish. That's not true about me. So I can therefore do whatever I want to do.
Yeah, you've just said something there which has really opened my eyes. I mean, I think another way I guess of putting it is that your self-belief it's an abstract concept, isn't it? That, like you say, you've created in your mind based upon experiences and the way you've thought about the world, and that can be challenged, can't it?
Absolutely. And I think you're right, Paul. One of the big things for me is that people talk about the world outside affecting them. So something happens and that affects me. And I talk a lot and I speak to people about the fact that actually the world doesn't work like that. The world works the other way around. We work from the inside out.
Right.
So, if we believe something, it becomes fact. It's not the other way around. It's not a fact and then we believe it.
Yeah.
And so if we don't believe something, then it's no longer true. And that has an impact on how we see the world.
Yeah.
Whereas most people, people say things, I have a saying sometimes, and people say things like, I'll believe it when I see it. And I often say, actually, no, it doesn't work like that. Because you'll only ever see it when you believe it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
It sounds stupid, but it does. Because that's what people do, is, they expect to see something in the world as being that there's an event that happens and that affects them, when actually it's a projection. It's our perception of what's going on that causes us to feel a certain way about something that's happening in the world.
Yeah, that makes sense. And you can choose how you feel about things as well, can't you? That's a choice as well.
Absolutely. And we do that by changing what we think about it, because our feelings are a direct result of the thoughts that we hold.
Yeah, definitely. Well, we're coming towards the end of our time this evening now. So you've got some events coming up in the near future. So what can people expect and how can they find out more about them?
Yeah, so what I decided to do this year, at the request of one or two people as well, I've run some for local people and some of my team in the business and things like that. But a lot of people have been asking for some more information, so I decided to put an event on. And the whole idea behind them really is to give people the first point of this awareness. Okay. I can't get 10 years plus of reading and studying into one day, but I can get them to a point where the two key things I think in any business, doesn't matter whether you're in network marketing or you're an entrepreneur, the two key things for me are if we can get people to be focused, and by focused I mean clear on what they want and why they want it, in a deep enough way for them to truly understand it. And then we can remove the fear that stops them taking action to get them towards that goal. Then I think you can make huge strides in whatever it is that you want in a very short space of time. And so the plan of doing the events was really to start people on that journey. It was to give them enough information for them to be able to say, I now understand some of the things. I understand what's happening, perhaps why it's happening, but also more importantly, I have an awareness of it now.
I see. And
I can start to say, I now know that's an issue and I need to do something about it, rather than just kind of plodding on saying, I don't know why I keep doing this. We talk often, don't we, that the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. Yet in general, when we're talking about the way that our behavior patterns and the way that we do things, that's generally what we do. Yeah. We do the same thing over and over again, but somewhere along the line, we try and expect a different result. And it's never going to happen unless we make some changes. And I talk a lot about the fact that change is an inside job. You've got to start looking inward first. And that's what those events are about, is to give people that initial awareness and a bit of understanding of some of the basics, so they can get a starting point in terms of, okay, now I need to know, I now know where I need to look in order to move forward, and maybe understanding some of the things that either A, are holding me back, and then you can do something about it, or at least be in a position to say, well, actually, the reason I'm not taking the action is because I don't really know where I'm going.
Right.
And I need some clarity about what I really want.
Okay, so what's for those people that are listening that maybe want to connect with you and find out a bit more about the events, where they're at, the dates and times, things like that, what's the best way to connect with you?
So there's several ways. They can get me on Facebook. At Dean Fox Official is my Facebook page for the events and the coaching. They can find it on there. They can get me on LinkedIn, just searching for Dean Fox, or they can drop me an email directly, dean@deanafox.com, or just go to the website. But ultimately, yeah, the easiest way is probably to find me on Facebook or drop me a message.
Yeah, we'll make sure that we put the links to your Facebook page on here as well. Cool. So if you're watching this via Facebook, it'll be in the message in this thread somewhere. So
superb. So Dean, thanks very much for your time this evening. Wish you all the success with the upcoming events, and we'll see you again soon.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Cheers. Take care.
Take care, guys.